So who are you?
I am Richard Murillo. I'm a senior development lead for Microsoft's Legal and Corporate Affairs IT group in the administrative IT division.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've been over this building. You guys have a nice little building all by yourself.
Yeah, we're out here all by ourselves out outside of West Campus. So.
Right. You said operations is here too?
We have our legal operations team. They're right next door.
Okay.
And they're actually just down the hall.
Yep.
And so they handle all things data center and customer related for our legal team.
Oh, okay. And are most of the lawyers in this building then?
Lawyers aren't. They're actually on main campus. They keep us pretty separate.
Interesting. So what do you do? Because you have a different role than I think I've ever interviewed anybody at Microsoft.
Yeah. So my role here really is to. I'm driving a lot of process. So what are we doing in legal and corporate affairs IT? What are we doing in our division of administrative IT? There's new tools and new technologies that are coming out, right? Windows Vista, Windows Longhorn, Visual Studio, Team Foundation, Server, and Team System that just got launched.
Yeah.
And so how can we take these new tools, these technologies, how can we look at our existing processes and make those better so that we can streamline our development and present our products to our customer. And ultimately our customer is Microsoft itself, but what we can do there to save Microsoft money obviously is a win for all of us. So it's a different thing, kind of.
And you're a geek, and you're not a lawyer.
No, yeah, I'm a hardcore geek, definitely not a lawyer.
How did you get this job?
So I have a lot of industry experience, government type stuff. Arts organizations, big organizations dealing lots with data, process. It's all really around process. So,
when you say process, what do you mean?
So, for example, our software development process. So, what happens inside of the software development lifecycle? What happens in the solution delivery? So, how can we make that more efficient? How can we make the trade-off or the handoff between our business and IT more efficient? And that's really where I'm kind of sitting in. We have this new administrative IT initiative to make that better, but the idea here is how can we make our software map to a business initiative and ultimately to Microsoft's goals.
Right. And so people on the outside world, because people all over the world are watching these videos, right? They don't deal with your software, right? It's mostly the legal team here at Microsoft that uses or consumes your software.
Yeah, that's right. So
okay.
Yeah, our legal and some outside counsel, we have partners and things like that work with us. So I think technically we're supposed to call them partners, not customers. But yeah, so it's Microsoft itself and our related partners that are
right. Now I know a couple of lawyers, but I know some lawyers here who work here, and lawyers who work for Boeing and other places, and they typically haven't been the most advanced users of technology in the world, right? In fact, one of my friends, Buzz Bruggeman, has always complained that he finds it very difficult to get lawyers to adopt new ideas or new ways of thinking. Is that sort of your job to come up with a way to make our legal team more efficient? Or
well, that's part of what we do. So I work with specific kinds of lawyers in specific areas inside of legal and corporate affairs.
Right.
And so the thing about the team that I work on is that we constantly adopt new software. If it's in beta, yeah, we're going to check it out to see if that's something that can solve some of our problems. And so there is a sort of pushback from our business side. Yeah, it's kind of risky, but we have lots of experience dealing with cutting and bleeding edge software. So as part of Microsoft IT, we get to dog food new software that comes out before it's available for public consumption. So we get to test it out. We get to throw it through the ringer to see, hey, what's going on with it. And we just completed the Early Technology Adoption Program, the TAP program for SQL Server 2005 that just got released this past November.
Yeah.
So.
And how's that working out?
It's working out great. We've had tremendous performance gains, about 300% performance in some of our searching. So we have a really large full text catalog. We do with
so that
that
makes for happier lawyers. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Because they can find
what they need much faster.
And that's a large percentage of lawyering, right? Is looking for past precedents or past cases, or looking through court records, because I deal with them all the time, and that's sort of what they're paid for is to have access to information,
Right.
and so that when they're arguing in front of a judge, they have all that information and they can present a good case.
Exactly, and that's exactly what we're in the business to do, is to make sure that when we have a legal battle, that we have the tools that allow our lawyers to do their jobs. The idea is that technology is supposed to be an augmentation of an extension of that person, not supposed to be a hindrance to them, and
Right.
so that's something that we can do.
So what cool new bleeding edge stuff are you playing with lately?
So right now, we have a Visual Studio Team Foundation server. We're completely running.
And that's not even out yet, right? That's not shipping software.
That just shipped, I think, mid-March.
Okay.
So like a month ago, it shipped. So
I'm behind the times. I gotta get back over to the Visual Studio team.
So
they're shipping so much; it's hard to keep up with this company.
Yeah. And so we implemented that.
Yeah.
Our division is looking to implement it now that it's been released, and so I'm a member of the steering committee there to help drive those standards.
And what does it let you do that older versions didn't let you do?
So this whole thing about Visual Studio itself was just a development environment.
Yeah.
It's just a way for you to write software in some way, shape, or form and then push that out.
Right.
And so what now we have in Team Foundation Server is a way for the IDE itself to be integrated in with a process. So your software development lifecycle process.
Okay.
And there's multiple flavors of that process, right? You have like your agile methodology and you have your waterfall kind of process.
Right.
By default, Visual Studio Team Foundation Server ships with Microsoft Solution Framework for Agile and one for Waterfall. And so what we can do is we can create...
Which process are you on?
So we actually use both. We have, in our program space, we have multiple projects that run, and we have Waterfall on a bigger one, and then we have a smaller project.
Waterfall, for those people who haven't heard these terms, is you ship on an 18-month or 24-month cycle, and you go through the specking stage, then the development stage, then the beta testing phase, then the rollout phase, and that takes like 18 months. Where Agile techniques is maybe a 4 or 8 week.
Yeah, we actually one of our projects, I think we're set up to 2 to 3 week sprints. So to set that up, and so the other one I think is on 1 month schedule. So shorter, the idea is so we can shorten the feedback loop and to drive a higher quality product out to our customers and partners.
Yeah.
So with this though, so we can create, inside of Team Foundation Server, we can create bugs, we can create issues and risks, we can tie that with work and actually record time inside of there. There's source control that's all built into this now. So there still is Visual Source Safe, and that's been updated now. So there's VSTS 2005, and then there's a new version that's built that's based out of SQL Server. So it's ridiculously fast for you to do queries and do everything fun like that. And the cool thing about in Team Foundation Server is it takes information about your code, history, tests, and it puts it into a data warehouse. And you can then run reports off of that. And depending on your flavor of MSF, your Waterfall, the CMMI, or Agile,
What's
you
CMMI?
can see a continual, continual management process improvement or something like that. I forget what it is.
I've never heard that term before.
So yeah, it's a big waterfall. It's a specific type of methodology inside of the big waterfallian thing.
Okay.
So anyway, so you have
sorry for running.
yeah. So you have inside of Agile, you have you can create burn down charts, right? So if you're using like XP or Scrum, you can have that. You can create story cards and put those story cards inside of Team Foundation Server. And so it's like, oh, I'm doing code. I need to do a check-in. What now you can do inside of Visual Studio is tie your check-in specifically back to a work item or a story card or a bug. And so you have a scenario, for example, like, hey, here I am, I'm a developer, and I have a test team that just threw a bug back at me. So they've created a test for me, they were nice enough to do that, and here's the bug. I get that information from the bug info in Team Foundation Server, I open it up, I can run it on my screen, yeah, that's definitely a bug, fix the case, verify it, yeah, it's done, check it back in against that bug, and so now that bug gets updated to say, here's the code that was changed, here was changed by who, we've introduced the idea of a change set also. So it's kind of a snapshot in time of what it will look like in source control. So you can back out individual changes. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So then we take that and we can send it back to test. Test can rerun that exact same test and look at our previous test results shared within Team Foundation server. So they can see, yeah, Richard fixed this on such and such a day with this change. And they can verify that, yep, that's good, close that bug. And then all of that history is tracked. We can look at reports and say, oh, on certain days, certain bugs were there. And so, no, we can look at the history of what's been going on with the project, sort of gauge the overall health of the project simply by looking at data that we deal with every single day, but we don't think of extracting out into a data mart.
Right.
And so Team Foundation Server gives us this capability out of the box.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, do you have something to show us what it looks like?
I was working on something a little bit earlier, but my computer's being a little problematic, but we'll give it a try anyway.
Oh, cool. So, what kinds of skills did you need to learn to work in this new world, or?
So in this new world, it's really SharePoint based.
Okay.
So I can show a couple of things here. So you have a server that actually exists inside of the Team Foundation server, and it's actually a series of web services that it actually runs on. And so here you can create a team project that gets registered with the server. It creates a SharePoint site for you. It creates source control. It creates some templates, your work items and bugs, and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And so here, there's a new pane for Team Explorer and some new menus and such that come up. And essentially, what you get inside of inside of Visual Studio, you get a look at the SharePoint document repository. You get a view. You can see SQL Server Reporting Services reports directly inside of Visual Studio. So you don't have to go to the SharePoint site. You don't have to leave your development environment to look up a bug. It's all within the same environment. So let's look, for example, at documents. So here's a bunch of documents in our document library from SharePoint, and they go over everything from general documents to our process guidance. We have documents for our program managers and project managers and all sorts of fun stuff. But I can open a document directly from here. So I want to look at PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
I can just do that and open the PowerPoint right here. I don't have to go out to the SharePoint site.
Wow. And that's all coming in from the SharePoint server?
Yeah, it's all coming in from the SharePoint server.
That's interesting.
So over here, let's actually look at the SharePoint server. So same document libraries that I'm getting over there, I can blow out this node, for example, and here's a design document for a component, and we can get it directly from here, from our SharePoint. So it's the same kind of deal, and it's just a tool, an aggregate view of all your information in one place. So there's SharePoint you can pick up as one of those skills. You can also create custom reports. So if you're big into what you want to do with SQL reporting services, you can create your own custom reports against the data warehouse. We've created reports that go against our data warehouse and like a project server, for example, to track time. So we just look at the OLAP key from one place from the data warehouse, create a new view, and write a report. So source control, all now directly built into Visual Studio. I can browse, I can merge, branch, history, queries, all sorts of fun stuff inside of here now. So this is actually a tool that I'll be releasing to .NET at some point in the relatively near future. And what it is, it's a tool that takes exception information and breaks it apart and decomposes it down into a really fundamental level. And so you can take a .NET exception, and typically your .NET exception is going to give you a fairly rich amount of information.
Yeah.
But such is not always the case. So
So you just entered a number an error code that you would have gotten in .NET.
Yeah, some exception.
Yeah.
And so you can see the what it is, and this will take a hex or decimal. so you can figure it out. And usually this stuff will show up in your error log, and it'll show you different kinds of information. Is this a Microsoft error? Is it a third-party error? So what control caused a problem? And this is especially prevalent when you deal with COM. So like my project, we have to deal a lot with COM.
Yeah.
And so one of the tools inside of Visual Studio is there's a new architecture diagram where you can map out the systems. So we can say, this is a web service, this is an Office solution, this is the front end in a Windows UI, here's the ASP.NET piece, and they all connect to this central web service.
Yeah.
And in our web service, we have some older legacy stuff we have to interop with, so that's all done in COM. Well, when there's a problem with that code, we get an H result back, but we don't know, is it a Microsoft code problem? Is it a third-party problem? We have no idea. And so we can punch these numbers in, and it actually goes into our error logging. So now operations can see a full list of actually what's happening. So we have some error code information, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
Really cool stuff.
So let's look at some of the cool tools that help developers be more productive inside a Visual Studio team system. So one new thing that they've given us is a class diagram. And so one thing that's different is that the class diagram, before traditionally you could reverse engineer like to Visio.
Yeah.
And if you're in Visio, it's just a model. So if I make a change to my code, I have to re-update the model. And if I've made changes, you have problems with that.
They're not tied together.
Right, they're definitely not tied together. And so there's some things you can reverse and forward engineer, but it's pretty limited. This is actually a visual representation, a view of the code. If I update the code, it updates the model, or the diagram. If I update the diagram, it updates the code. You can do comments, you can add events, all sorts of fun stuff.
Wow.
And so here, for example, here's some, here's the actual analysis class. And so you can see all sorts of stuff that's actually happening inside of this class. I can get information. You can even, so here I can say, based on my design, I need to refactor something, I need to rename it. In a code review, for example, we're going through, and this is the kind of information we give in a code review.
Yeah.
They say, hey, the name of that method doesn't make a lot of sense. We need to change it. We can use tools built into Visual Studio Team System to do this.
And if you use that, it changes that method name everywhere.
Everywhere. And so you don't have to go find all and replace. You can reorder parameters, and Visual Studio takes care of all that. What really makes this interesting is that you can export these diagrams as images, and we put those up on our SharePoint site. And so even people that don't have access to our source code repository, we still may want to consult them on their opinion. They're a senior developer, they've been working in the industry for 20 years, they know something, so hey, does this sound like a good idea to you? We can show them the diagram, email it to them, put it on the SharePoint, put it in a doc. Wow. So we have technical specifications. We can put these things directly in there, and that's perfectly acceptable. And because it is the code itself.
How has this changed how your team works?
So for us, there's a lot of overhead in what we used to do. So we do the whole envisioning and do all the documentation, and we build it and find what our implementation was isn't exactly what we thought the first time, and so you have to go update all those documents for as built. Now I just go this and go, hey, I can re-export that view, and I can update my documentation in much, much less time. For me now, I spend maybe 20% of my time actually doing documentation, whereas up front I was doing 50, 60, 70, 80% of my time writing these kinds of things, the tables and Visio and all that stuff.
Really crazy.
So yeah, it's nuts. And so again, the whole traceability piece. What is it that you want to do? What do you want to interact with? And underneath the hood, this actually will write code. So if I want to add a class or interface or anything, even abstract classes, you can do inheritance, and it'll actually draw the lines. It's like a database ERD diagram, entity relationship diagram. You'll see it all inside of here. Grouping, all sorts of fun, really fun stuff you can see here. And then here, this is my favorite piece, export diagram as image. You can save it in all sorts of different formats and distribute it to the rest of your team. So some really, really, really great stuff. And my blog actually, my subject of my blog is actually to be how can we use Visual Studio Team System, how can we use Visual Studio Team Foundation Server to map back to our business?
Yeah.
And how can we align our IT objectives with our business objectives?
Yeah.
And so some things that I've noticed working here in the IT end of Microsoft is that our customers and partners aren't begging us for infrastructure upgrades. We have to take that initiative ourselves, but we have to convince them that it's a good idea to upgrade to SQL Server 2005, for example. And they're not going to say, oh yeah, here's a few $100,000, go for it. We'll see you in 3 months.
Yeah.
So,
people might not realize that internally inside Microsoft, each group runs like a business.
Right.
And so you still have to pay the SQL Server team for what you're using, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people on the outside world might not understand that because they think Microsoft is monolithic.
Yeah, it's actually a bunch of really small businesses. Like this group, for example, is about 50 people.
Yeah.
And so we're like a small business like anyone else, and it just so happens that we're under the Microsoft umbrella. But yeah, if we want help from the SQL Server team, there's this whole thing we have to get, and somebody's got to pay for our time. So, yeah, so that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
Anything else that's cool about the tool that you've learned, or any tips? Because I'm sure a lot of developers haven't used Team Foundation System yet. Any tips on getting into it, or things that you sort of have to rethink, or from going from the old Visual Studio 2003 world into the new Team Foundation
Well,
system?
there's lots of new tools, and so there's a lot of things, some third-party stuff that had been around. So you have a bunch of the Martin Fowler tools, right? Test-driven development and all these testing tools, and how can we do analysis, and these things are all now built into Visual Studio, and I can share these with Visual Studio Team Foundation Server. So if I have code in a code review, I want to run a performance analysis against it, I can do that and then publish the results and attach it to a work item and say, hey Bob, I need you to go check this out. And he can go pull that down, rerun the test, look at the performance, and make some tweaks even, rerun the perf test and compare the two. So that's kind of some interesting things. So it's really more, it supports a lot more different scenarios rather than just writing code. All the different views, and it works for all kinds of different developers. So, there's the simpler views for people that want less clutter and people that care more about the details. They can get that detailed rich information that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So, multiple disciplines now can work in it. So, our test teams can work in this.
Okay.
Our program managers, if they're technical, they want to do this. Like our program manager, for example, he likes SQL Server reporting services. So he writes reports and publishes them up there, and he does that within Visual Studio. And it's the same SKU that we use as developers.
Okay.
So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great
Makes
thing.
you guys a lot more productive, I would.
It does. It's all about collaboration. And the idea for time is one of our finite resource.
Yeah.
And so how can we send information across to another person, another team, in the smallest amount of words in the shortest time possible? And these new tools allow us to do that. A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the things out of the box. Collaboration. For example, we have the teams that are across the globe, and so this now allows us to communicate with them more effectively. So
Very cool.
it's very neat.
Well, thanks for inviting me over. And showing
Sure.
me stuff. Got anything else?
You can check out my blog,
Yeah.
blogs.msdn.com/RIMURI. That's my Visual Studio Team System, Team Foundation Server blog.
Yep.
And there's going to be a lot more. There's some content in there now about architecture. There'll be a lot more in the future about architecture and all the tools that I've talked about today. Some architecture diagrams, class diagrams, how we use those to be more productive, and how we map back to business initiatives.
Cool. Well, thanks. We'll check out the blog and link to it too. So,
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks.